A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to HJN Season 4. More importantly, HJN Super Graphics. This whole series is going to be bent on various video games that I played over the years, and of course, I'll have tons to say about some of the best titles I might have played in more recent years. For this instance, the long story of Security Breach is thankfully over. Don't have much more to talk about on that part. In any case though, number 2580 is going to focus on another really big game out there, AVGN Deluxe. Well, this one's also a pretty big one. Much like Security Breach, AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe, as it's actually known as because it is the combination of AVGN Part 1 as well as a sequel, takes us to the world of the one and only Angry Video Game Nerd. I'm more than certain that there is a new season bound to show up around here, and I'm sure we'll have lots more to say about Angry Video Game Nerd. But I will say, he was in fact one of the greatest phenomenons in internet history. And the fact that he's still around today, 20 years later, goes to show that he is not willing to give up. I'm sure that if there was never such a thing as Angry Video Game Nerd, a lot wouldn't have happened in life. A lot on the internet, especially on YouTube, would not have happened at all. But when you think about it, it almost does seem like maybe AVGN's reign is coming to an end, and there are some signs that show that he's aging not so great. But to be fair, he does have a life outside of this sort of work. A wife, 2 daughters, and also used to have 2 cats named Boo and Yeti, whom have had some pretty big lives, but are sadly no longer with us as of today. Yeah, a bit sad when you think about it, but let's be real. They've at least been a part of his life. On his videos, on the AVGN website, known as cinemassacre.com. I mean, there's just so much that I could talk about regarding AVGN as of today. But the game is what we're here for. AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe is in fact the adaptation that solely takes on the long, progressive story of the Angry Video Game Nerd and his life discussing various video games. His thoughts on the NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, Atari 2600, 5200, 7800, PlayStation lineage, and Xbox lineage, everything you could possibly think of, even playing a few mobile games on smartphones. Yeah, my horse Prince, need I say more. Possibly the best thing I've ever seen in 2024. So, I'm sure 2025 he'll have something really awesome as well. But in any case though, the adventures of the Angry Video Game Nerd in this particular context goes basically to the point where in the first AVGN game, which came out around 2013, it was mostly made as a PC game which can even work with Xbox controllers, as AVGN himself actually tested and found out that it was working great for what it was. It was a side-scroller platform for what it was, and the same thing goes with the sequel along with the bonus in the game that I got. AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe does have a bonus segment to it, dedicated to the one and only Bugs Bunny. Because if there's one sworn enemy that we can think of when it comes to AVGN, then it's got to be Bugs Bunny. Or possibly anybody else he's faced over the years. Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Spider-Man, Super Mario, the Doom Slayer, and hundreds of other video game properties over the years. He's had some special guest stars over the years as well, like Macaulay Culkin, Mike Butters, Gilbert Gottfried, and who could forget, in 2013, the same year he reviewed the AVGN game on PC, he also invited the one and only Toxic Avenger man himself, Lloyd Kaufman. Yeah. Lots of stuff I could talk about regarding AVGN, but I don't want to get too distracted by that. The game itself takes us to the first part, which revolves around the PC game that I mentioned earlier, that he played, where you have 8 different maps to choose from, all of which correlate the things that he stated over the years. There's a map dedicated to the likes of Castlevania and Mega Man, two long-running series that he was a big fan of over the years, known as A-Holevania. Yeah, not saying that word out loud at least. Then there's also one known as Blizzard of Balls, which is basically a winter-themed level where he encounters Santa Claus and even uses him like a sleigh. There's also a level that takes place in the underworld where he actually fights the devil. And there's even a world in which it circulates around a bunch of happy faces. Faces that can stare at you when you die and make fun of you, supposedly. But the thing is that in my experience, I was actually able to beat all of these levels, even on a pretty high difficulty. It does kind of bring a similar kind of feeling to what he's experienced over the years, where sporadic difficulty was common in some games. I mean, a game that gets too hard, then gets too easy, then hard again, it honestly needs to be a little more on the progressive side if you ask me. But it doesn't matter. I mean, AVGN practically became everything he's fought against over the years. And it's just hard to imagine. If he could go back to his 2004 self and tell him about how he suddenly is playing Jekyll and Hyde perpetually, I couldn't even imagine how that could be handled. But you know what though? After beating all 8 of those worlds, there's a 9th and final world. Laughin', Jokin', Numbnuts. This is basically the epitomal nickname that was given to a certain toy company called LJN Toys. A company that was actually well known back in the day for creating games on the NES, mainly through publishing, not at all but through developing. That was basically left to some companies. But over the years, it was thought that LJN was actually responsible for developing the games in particular. A good majority of LJN material did focus on various licensed franchises like Spider-Man, Alien, X-Men, Jaws, Back to the Future, and even Friday the 13th. So, lots of licensed franchises have had LJN's signature rainbow stamped on them. But in this case, the fact that you actually go through the world of Laughin', Jokin', Numbnuts according to the AVGN himself, and even face off against the one and only Fred Epp. Yep. He's considered the programmer responsible for all these games, and as AVGN himself states, that he'd rather have fun with the grass than Bill and Ted. That's just one way to put it. But after beating that, we have a part 2. A part 2 which apparently requires the AVGN to investigate some sort of disturbance. Yeah, it's one of those little cliches. Kind of similar to when the first game opened up with him getting dragged into the TV by his own genitals. Yeah, in this case, it's just like, it's sort of like the opening from the Cheetah Men games. Yeah. In the sequel, we have a similar thing going on. Too simple of a story, little to no explanation, yada yada yada, and now we're playing AVGN Part 2. Similar to AVGN Part 1, we do have a number of different properties, as well as a bunch of new creations that AVGN had come up with, including a giant tanuki with probably the biggest sack that I've ever seen. I mean, could you ever imagine getting cherries that huge? I could not possibly imagine having something like that. Ugh. But you know what? Part 2 is still pretty good for what it is. It still offers the same side-scrolling and platforming that the first game got, except it does give us some newer materials to work with. And we do at least have the added benefit of getting some extra lives, a health bar, and even checkpoints. Unlike a good majority of other games that AVGN had discussed. I almost wonder, is there ever a mode where it makes you go hardcore? Kind of like Ghosts and Goblins, for instance? Or even Famicom Transformers? Who knows? I never thought about that option. And I probably didn't need to, because why would I need to do that? Anyways though, with Part 2, we do have a similar sort of system in which that it works at like a map. But this one is more akin to Super Mario Bros. 3, in which it's kind of more of an overhead sort of feature. a map layout that does allow you to scroll to the exact level you want to go to, and then you select it and off you go to basically whatever land that the game's own story takes you to. And much like the first game, there's a good variety of different things to look out for, as well as some nice animation to it. I'd say in comparison to the first game, the second might be a bit better in contrast to what the first offered. The first felt classic for what it is, being that it had lots to offer on the basis of AVGN related lore, as well as tons of references to licensed properties and encounters with the actual in-property characters, like Jason and Bugs Bunny. But, however, upon beating Part 2, there is the hidden Part 3. The bonus segment in which it includes a bunch of levels just as well like the other games did. But in this section, it's more of a tower-based thing. You climb up to the top of the building, and at the top of the building there is a very, very certain familiar somebody whom you encounter for the last time. Yeah. AVGN basically goes into his room. It turns out to be a fake set. Bugs Bunny has grown giant. And the final battle does in fact center upon you fighting him. And oh man, he's basically not messing around. He's kind of like in both times, where in 2007 and 2009, as well as a few other moments in the series where his appearance in AVGN's life is just insane. And the fights they have with each other is unreal. I wonder how Mike Matei, the guy who's played Bugs Bunny in those episodes, would feel about this. AVGN actually fighting Bugs Bunny, a giant version of him nonetheless. Kind of reminds me of how Goku beat a giant Piccolo, or even other moments in life, like Optimus Prime and a giant Unicron. Nevertheless though, after going through all of that, it's just crazy fun on loads of different levels. The kind of which that I never figured out to ever talk about here. And you know what? It sure is quite a unique opportunity for me to be able to try a copy at a good discount, courtesy of Cinemassacre themselves, believe it or not. And, you know, it's just amazing for what it is. A nice compilation of all the things you could possibly talk about when in regards to AVGN or the world that he's created as of 2004. So, 20 plus years have passed. And I'm sure to say that another 20 years of time could definitely leave us with way more than what we could bargain for. And possibly, he'll give us even more hope about YouTube. It could possibly change for the better. Or it could be the opposite. We never know for sure. Unless it just shows up. So in terms of AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe, plus the bonus segments, I humbly am giving this game a good 8.8 out of 10.1. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys will have much more to say about this game as well. So I will see you guys again with more of this stuff. Come tomorrow, I have another subject to talk about. And of course, I'll see you around then.